Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Soul Land 2 Peerless Tang Men based on novel. So let's start. Shusansha chuckled said, I'm experienced. The two of them have been watching you ever since you returned. Isn't this obvious enough? Furthermore, both of them are always mumbling to themselves when they see you. They wear resentful looks whenever they look at you. Nan Xiuqiu is more obvious than Yigai. However, Yigai spends more time looking at you compared to Nan Xiuqiu. I don't know what's so good about you. Why are all the beauties interested in you instead of me? Because you're ugly, Ji Juechen said from one side. Shusansha snorted furiously. Are you trying to embarrass me? Can't you just play along? Ji Juechen flipped his hand and whipped out his judgment sword. Do you want to play? Shusansha snorted. I'm not scared of you. Little Junior, since there's a river here, there are naturally fish here as well. Why don't you make some fish soup for us? I know how good you are. You haven't demonstrated your cooking skills in a while. Since you have such a good opportunity now, go on and take it. Huo Yuhao asked, What? Are you really going to spar with Brother Ji? Shusansha said delightfully, No, I'm going to settle him. I already have 7 rings now. I'm not scared of him anymore. Old Ji, see how I'm going to settle you today. Come on, let's go to one side and spar. Usually, he avoided Ji Juechen. However, today was an exception. He had just become a soul sage, and just fused with a golden tortoise. How could he resist challenging Ji Juechen? After all, he had an extroverted personality to begin with. Ji Juechen didn't expect Shusansha to readily agree with his request. His eyes flashed before he turned around and walked towards an empty clearing that wasn't very far away. He used his actions to prove his words, that he wasn't just taunting Shusansha. Huo Yuhao felt a little helpless as he shook his head. He turned around and walked towards the river. If Tang Wutong weren't around, Huo Yuhao might still not have taken the initiative to cook. It wasn't that he was unwilling to cook for everyone else. It was because he didn't want Yigai and Nan Xiuqiu to misunderstand his actions. However, things were different now. Tang Wutong was around now. He wanted to do what they used to do before to jolt her memories. As for Yigai and Nan Xiuqiu, they shouldn't overthink it since Tang Wutong was around. As he walked to the side of the river, Huo Yuhao rolled up his trousers before he walked in. A few ladies, who were washing them sleeves immediately threw furious glances at him. Nan Xiuqiu was displeased as she said, Hey, you've dirtied the river water. Huo Yuhao was a little annoyed as he replied, Student, please watch carefully. I'm the one swimming in the water. I'm not even complaining about the water that you've used to clean yourself. If you're good enough, don't eat the food that I'm going to cook later. He had already started as he spoke. He didn't even need any tools. His hands were his tools. He gently pressed his hands against the river's surface, before making a flinging motion outward. Suddenly, a small fish around 20 centimeters long shot out of the water. The ripples that it generated looked extremely captivating under the sunset glow. Small fish started to jump towards the shore one after another, landing on the shore. In a matter of seconds, more than 10 small fish were already on shore. The 5 ladies were stunned when they saw what Huo Yuhao was doing. It wasn't difficult for them to catch fish from the river, given their cultivations. However, Huo Yuhao was extremely swift and accurate, without making a single mistake. The gentle suction force that he produced also didn't cause too much river water to splash around. His every movement would force a small fish to accurately shoot out of the water towards the shore, increasing the difficulty level of catching them. From the time he entered the river until he went back on shore, including the time he used to converse with Nan Xiuqiu, he only took 2 minutes to finish catching all the fish he needed. When he returned to shore, he sat down by the riverside. As he waved his right hand, a small fish landed in it. Jade green light flashed before his life guardian blade jumped out in between his fingers. The life aura of his life guardian blade retracted under Huo Yuhao's control. During this process, green lights flashed a few times, and a small fish was completely descaled. He then proceeded to wash the fish in the river before throwing it into a pot beside him. Huo Yuhao finished descaling and cleaning all the fish in less than 10 minutes. He was very sharp and neat during the entire process. Everything felt very smooth and natural. The 5 ladies, including Tang Wutong, were all drawn over. As for the fight that had just begun on the other side, they were completely uninterested. Even Jiang Nannan, who was already familiar with Huo Yuhao's capabilities, was attracted. Compared to before, Huo Yuhao was much faster now. They were all either soul emperors or soul sages. Naturally, they were much more observant than ordinary people. They could clearly see that only the backs of the gills and tails of the fish were slit, apart from a single cut in the belly of every fish. These 2 slits were made to remove the tendons of the fish. Apart from these slits and cuts, the small fish weren't treated in any other way. However, they were completely descaled. Everything happened too quickly and cleanly. Huo Yuhao started retrieving all types of bottles from his storage-type soul tool. He didn't even measure or take a closer look at the amount of seasonings he was using before he started treating the fish in the pot. 4 or 5 of the fish were removed beforehand and weren't seasoned. Some of the condiments were very heavy in taste, while some were very refreshing. When they were mixed together, they seemed to create a very special fragrance. Jing Ziyan had tasted Huo Yuhao's grilled fish once before, but she only a little. Nan Xiuqiu had also tasted one before, but Yi Gai had naturally not tried his grilled fish. Tang Wutong squatted to one side and observed Huo Yuhao. She was filled with curiosity. She could naturally tell that he was whipping up a meal for everyone. But can he cook? Will it be delicious? He looks like a chef. Don't tell me that this fellow is also very impressive at cooking. Is he really talented in every aspect? Very quickly, Huo Yuhao finished seasoning all the fish. After that, he started to mix the spices with the fishes in the pot. In addition, he even rubbed them in the fishes' bellies. Not only were the fish seasoned on the outside, but they were also seasoned inside. Huo Yuhao smiled as he asked, "Can someone get me some tree branches? I need some that are about as thick as a pinky, and around 40 centimeters long. Their thickness must be uniform. I will also need some firewood. If you move fast, we can have our meal earlier." Tang Wutong was stunned for a moment. Before she could even react, Yi Gai had already opened her mouth. "I'll do it." Even as she said it, she had already stood up and quickly walked towards trees. Nan Xiuqiu glanced at Tang Wutong. Seeing that she wasn't moving, she was slightly stunned. Has she really lost her memory? Why hasn't she reacted to Sister Gai's action? In fact, Tang Wutong reacted internally. When Yi Gai said that she was going to help Huo Yuhao, she suddenly felt a little disappointed. However, she was adamant about not helping him. Yi Gai wasn't slow either. Very soon, she managed to grab a bunch of tree branches and firewood. Huo Yuhao had already filled another pot with clear water, and placed the fish that he didn't season into this pot. Jiang Nannan laughed as she said, "Yuhao, it seems like you only know how to cook fish. You always use this same recipe when you want to give us a treat. Don't you have anything new?" Huo Yuhao chortled and replied, "I can make some vegetables. However, where can we find greens in this remote area? I'll make some dry rations for everyone later. We can also eat something beforehand." Fourth senior, my family was very poor when we were young. We were only able to catch 1 or 2 fish occasionally and improve the quality of our meals. I'm not too good at whipping up other dishes. It was already very rare for me to eat fish when I was young. He spoke very naturally. No one reacted except Tang Wutong, who felt slightly sour in her heart. She secretly thought to herself, his life was actually so tough when he was young. Why am I feeling sad for him? After gathering firewood, starting a fire was naturally very easy. Yi Gai started the fire personally. She used her holy fire to light up the firewood, a sight that would no doubt make any evil soul masters who saw it throw up blood. On the other side, a bonfire had also been prepared. Huo Yuhao didn't rush to grill the fish. Rather, he waited quietly. The fish had to be marinated longer so that they would taste better. He wasn't in a hurry. He turned around and looked at the two who were sparring. As expected, Ji Juechen and Xu Sanxia were fighting very intensely. Just as Huo Yuhao was cooking his fish, Ji Juechen and Xu Sanxia clashed again. No matter how close Ji Juechen was to anyone, personal relationships never influenced him in a fight. Once he entered his fighting mode, Ji Juechen wasn't Ji Juechen anymore. He was the sword fanatic. He focused his gaze, and his 7 soul rings rose from beneath his feet. However, all his soul skills were peripheral to him. This was because he only had swords in his heart. He pointed his judgment sword toward the ground. He wasn't holding his sword with both hands, but only with one hand. He wasn't looking at Xu Sanxia either. Instead, he was calmly looking at his own sword. Xu Sanxia stood firmly 30 meters from Ji Juechen, at the position he had chosen. He had never once doubted Ji Juechen's fighting strength. Ji Juechen was extremely lethal. During the rescue mission in Sunrise City, it was Ji Juechen who had killed the most people. Xu Sanxia unleashed his golden Xuanwu shield, and 7 soul rings rose immediately. Xu Sanxia focused his gaze, and a layer of dark gold light surrounded his body. Behind him, a huge golden tortoise projection surfaced in the air. Naturally, it appeared because Xu Sanxia called it. "Old Ji, let's begin." Xu Sanxia shouted, lifting his golden Xuanwu shield. Ji Juechen finally moved. Xu Sanxi's words were like a horn that signaled the beginning of the fight. Ji Juechen instantly increased his speed, and he launched a swift attack at Xu Sanxia. Just as he burst out, he swept his judgment sword, its point close to the ground, towards Xu Sanxia. A streak of sharp black sword aura shot towards Xu Sanxia. Wherever this sword aura passed, there were a series of sharp wails in the air. These wails were deafening, and the sword aura was extremely devastating. Xu Sanxi's gaze instantly turned stern. This sword fanatic seems to have gotten even more impressive. Shrek's 7 monsters weren't the only ones who had improved. Ji Juechen had improved, too. Furthermore, the rate of his improvement wasn't any slower than the others. It was easy to forget that he was more focused than anyone else in terms of his cultivation. Furthermore, his cultivating speed had reached a whole new tier after he established his relationship with Jing Ziyan, due to his emotional release. From his original solitary domain, it had slowly evolved into his love domain. Yes, he was no longer heartless, and had feelings now. He was now the sword fanatic with the sword of love. Xu Sanxia used his golden Xuanwu shield to block Ji Juechen's attack. Given his experience, he was able to accurately resist the sword aura that came towards him. However, Xu Sanxia felt a little stunned when he resisted the sword aura. There was immense soul power contained within that sword aura, and there was also extremely strong spiritual power too. Ji Juechen could do this in the past, and was able to fuse his spiritual and soul power very well. However, his sword intent was much more domineering in the past, as if it could destroy everything instantly. The after effect, however, was much weaker. However, the sword aura that he had just unleashed was starkly different. Even after his soul power was crushed, his spiritual intent continued to penetrate the Xuanwu shield streak by streak. It seemed almost irresistible and unstoppable. This was a fundamental change. After all, Xu Sanxia was one of the top-ranked experts among the younger generation's cultivators, and also a top student from Shrek Academy. Naturally, he discovered this change immediately. Old Ji, impressive. However, Xu Sanxia was not an easy target, even though Ji Juechen's attack was very strong. After fusing with the golden tortoise, the defensive strength of his golden Xuanwu shield had increased several times over. When those streaks of spiritual power started to penetrate the shield, gentle, golden ripples started to spread on the surface of it. Xu Sanxia didn't even need to summon anything before the spiritual power was naturally dispelled. Ji Juechen had already leapt up by now. He didn't attack directly with his judgment sword like before. Rather, countless sword projections were formed, engulfing Xu Sanxia. Within those sword projections, there was only his sharp sword aura, but no elemental undulations could be felt. The dark and light elements carried by the Judgment Sword had been hidden. This was a magical feeling. Even as Shusansha sensed this, he didn't retreat. Instead, he took a step forward, and his golden Xuanwu shield shook slightly. He unleashed his first soul skill, Xuanwu Shield Formation. A huge patch of gold instantly turned into a huge golden wall. It was still circular in shape, but it now covered more than 15 square meters. All of Ji Juechen's sword lights landed on this huge wall and were devoured completely, without even making a ripple. Ji Juechen also revealed a look of astonishment. Shusansha had indeed improved, and it wasn't just a slight improvement. His defensive strength was extremely great now, even better than many soul Doluor that he had fought before. However, Ji Juechen was more motivated when his opponent was stronger. He gently tapped his toes against the shield wall and seemed to change into a whirlwind. Countless sword projections gathered and viciously struck Shusanshi's Xuanwu Shield Formation. The strange thing was that no sound was made when his attack landed on the Xuanwu Shield Formation. It was like a ray of light that disappeared after it struck the shield formation. Ji Juechen exploited the momentum to rebound away. At this point, cuts started to appear on Shusanshi's shield formation. A layer of pitch black started to spread outwards from the point of collision earlier. It didn't spread very fast, but a dark aura soon engulfed the golden Xuanwu shield. The Judgment Sword instantly turned bright gold, and the intense light element was set ablaze. At this instant, Ji Juechen seemed to possess Yi Gai's strength. His entire body was filled with a holy aura. He finally grasped his sword with both hands, and lifted his Judgment Sword up high. Ji Juechen instantly disappeared, and there was only a holy sword that existed in this heaven and earth. The intense holy aura soared furiously, while his sharp sword intent was completely contained within it. The might of his attack even caused the sunset glow in the distance to lose its color. Shusansha immediately retracted his Xuanwu shield formation, and was a little astonished as he watched Ji Juechen. It was his first time facing an elemental attack from the Judgment Sword. Right now, a deep gust of darkness had surged furiously into his body. Even with the defense of his shield, he wasn't able to expel the aura of darkness from his body. That aura even felt very thick, and surged into his body in streaks. Impressive. No wonder that sword is a Class 8 close combat soul tool. Right now, Shusansha finally understood why no one could fight Ji Juechen during their rescue mission in Sunrise City, and also why Ji Juechen had never summoned the power of his Judgment Sword when they sparred previously. If this were the past, he wouldn't be able to resist this interwoven power of darkness and light. The strength of the Judgment Sword was simply too frightening. Even with Ji Juechen's current cultivation, he still wasn't able to completely unleash the strength of the sword. There were many Class 9 soul tools in the world of soul engineers. However, there were only 3 close combat Class 9 soul tools. What Shusansha didn't know was that Ji Juechen's Judgment Sword was once recognized as the top close combat soul tool among all close combat soul tools below Class 9. Otherwise, Jing Hongchen wouldn't have risked all the dangers and come to Shrek Academy to get it back. Even the soul engineer who carved this sword wasn't able to completely unleash its strength. Swords were the king of weapons. In the Doluo continent, there might be someone who loved swords more than Ji Juechen, but it would be very hard to find them. After he received this Judgment Sword, Ji Juechen had almost never let it out of his sight. His understanding of it had completely transcended the understanding of even its creator. Right now, Shusansha was at an extremely disadvantageous situation. However, he didn't panic at all. He was already a soul sage. How could he possibly be the same as he was in the past? He unleashed his strength of the Xuanwu, and the light from his body instantly turned a dark gold. This dark golden glow didn't just make him taller and bigger, but it also caused dark gold rings to surge outward, expelling a huge portion of the dark element from him. The golden tortoise that was drifting behind him also moved at this moment. A golden glow was released from the golden tortoise's body and landed on Shusansha. It actually caused him and the golden Xuanwu shield to appear slightly illusory. They even looked like they were translucent. As golden lights flashed, the judgment sword slashed down. Ji Juechen was around 30 meters away from Shu Sanxia when he slashed out. However, the massive golden sword light that was formed swept 10 meters into the sky before descending terrifyingly like a rainbow. Everything within the area illuminated by the holy aura became extremely clear. There was a muffled bang. Golden light shot everywhere, and the aura of light surged into Shu Sanxi's body. In addition, the tip of the judgment sword was much more condensed with power compared to before, and the aura of darkness hadn't been completely expelled from Shu Sanxi's body yet. Suddenly, Shu Sanxia felt that his body was about to be torn apart by the intersection of light and darkness. Fortunately, this feeling only lasted for an instant. However, there was an additional 1 centimeter mark on the surface of his Xuanwu shield. The turtle snake on his shield also seemed to be groaning in pain. Ji Juechen had a completely different feeling. When his judgment sword struck the golden Xuanwu shield, he was stunned to discover that the sharpness and strength of his sword had been instantly dispelled by nearly 30% by the translucent golden Xuanwu shield. After that, his blade struck the Xuanwu shield. Shu Sanxia groaned slightly and staggered 3 steps back, before he managed to stabilize himself. His arms felt sore. Immense spiritual power had turned into a sharp blade that struck him, after penetrating his golden Xuanwu shield. Fortunately, this blade had already been weakened by his shield. Even so, Shu Sanxi's strength of the Xuanwu was still flashing intermittently. He had also tried to use his ghost shadow perplexing track to try escaping. However, it wasn't that easy to avoid the spiritual blade. His groan was mostly because of the impact of the spiritual power. It was very difficult for him to detach himself from this feeling. Shu Sanxi's spiritual power wasn't that weak, but he was still in a state of confusion. A streak of gentle white light shot out from the golden tortoise behind him and landed on his head. Shu Sanxia only felt the burden on his head lessening, and the intense, prickling pain from earlier eased slightly. His judgment sword is too strong, Shu Sanxia gulped. If not for the fact that his own abilities had increased, his shield would have been cut apart earlier. In terms of offensive strength, Ji Juechen was undoubtedly the best among anyone of the same age that he knew. A Soul Doluor, who wasn't a pure defensive type Soul Master, wouldn't have been able to resist Ji Juechen's attack. It was too frightening. Ji Juechen specializes in the cultivation of swords. His offensive strength is crazy. Surely it should be close to the standard of a titled Doluor. While Shu Sanxia was thinking all this, Ji Juechen's attacks didn't cease. Shu Sanxia was forced back, while Ji Juechen also jerked slightly in the air. After unleashing such a strong attack, he needed to catch his breath. However, his judgment sword soon turned into countless streaks of black light, sweeping towards Shu Sanxia. The element was changed to darkness. The pitch-black sword light started to engulf Shu Sanxia in streaks. Shu Sanxia was depressed. If he used his shield wall, these dark elements would quickly attach themselves to it. The power of darkness earlier wasn't a lot, but when he was judged by the light element earlier, the impact was incredibly strong. If he absorbed more of these dark elements, he would be subjected to greater stress during judgment. Light and darkness were incompatible, but they were fused under the effect of the judgment sword. The sword tapped into their incompatibility to increase its offensive strength to the extreme, showing how frightening the Class 8 judgment sword was. His figure flashed, and Shu Sanxia switched positions with Ji Juechen. As their positions switched, Ji Juechen was now on the ground, while Shu Sanxia was in the air. Ji Juechen's sword lights were naturally pointed diagonally down, so they could hit Shu Sanxia again. However, he was very familiar with Shu Sanxi's abilities. Shu Sanxia used his mysterious underworld displacement, and Ji Juechen reacted immediately. He didn't even look up before he swept a streak of black light at his former location with his sword. Shu Sanxi's shield was in front of him, and he staggered backward in the air as he was hit by Ji Juechen's attack. Just as he was feeling depressed, he formulated a plan. Intense dark gold light was released from his body and quickly into his surroundings. His sixth soul ring also shone brightly. Wasn't that his Xuanwu's domain? The main difference from before was that his black Xuanwu's domain had turned dark gold now. This Xuanwu's domain was like a vast ocean. Ji Juechen felt that his entire body was being covered in a viscous fluid as the domain covered him. His movements were extremely restricted. Shu Sanxi's seventh soul ring also lit up following this. His body started to shine bright gold, and his golden tortoise turned into a ray of golden light that's sticking close to his back. On the other hand, his golden Xuanwu shield stuck close to the front of his body. With this, Shu Sanxia formed a gigantic turtle shell. He shrank his body into the shell and disappeared. This was his seventh soul skill, his Xuanwu true body. There was a small, thin snake laying on the surface of his Xuanwu true body. What was truly astonishing was that this snake had turned blood red at this moment. In his Xuanwu's domain, Shu Sanxi's speed was much faster than under normal conditions. In this domain, Ji Juechen was greatly restricted, and his movements extremely slow. Bright golden light flashed, and the golden Xuanwu drifted within the domain. Everything around it seemed to have transformed. Streaks of immense soul power were unleashed towards Ji Juechen. These streaks of soul power were like waves and undercurrents as they furiously struck Ji Juechen's body. Ji Juechen wanted to react, but the waves and undercurrents were interfering. More frighteningly, Ji Juechen could clearly sense undercurrents sweeping into his blood. These undercurrents interfered with the circulation of his soul power, causing his entire body to be greatly restrained. He found it difficult to move at all. Shu Sanxi's golden Xuanwu shone brightly, and transformed into a ball of golden light that raced towards Ji Juechen. If Shu Sanxia didn't exploit this perfect opportunity, he wasn't fit to be called the Eternal Defense. Ji Juechen turned very serious. He gripped his judgment sword tightly with both hands before sweeping it up, unleashing all his soul power. However, his abilities were weakened by half in the Xuanwu domain. When his judgment sword collided with the Xuanwu that approached him, he was flung away by the collision. Streaks of flowing dark gold light surged out from the Xuanwu's domain and engulfed Ji Juechen. The massive golden Xuanwu suddenly opened its mouth, and an intense dark gold wave was unleashed towards Ji Juechen. Even Ji Juechen didn't expect Shu Sanxia to be so strong after unleashing his martial soul true body. Ji Juechen's seventh soul ring shone at this moment. One face of his sword shone with golden light, while the other face shone with black light. The intense lights flashed in time, with the dark golden light from the Xuanwu's domain. Ji Juechen's body started to turn illusory, and his sword became the center of this illusion. A two-colored sword appeared and broke free from the restraint of the Xuanwu's domain. It turned into a frightening arc of light, and collided with the golden Xuanwu. A crisp ding vibrated out, and lights shot everywhere. This time, Ji Juechen didn't gain an advantage over Shu Sanxia. When his streak of sword light struck the golden Xuanwu, the streaks of flowing, dark gold light in the Xuanwu's domain kept surging towards the blade of his sword, weakening the huge sword he had formed. No matter how hard he tried to advance, he was significantly drained in the process. Ji Juechen's terrifying sword light suddenly stopped and deflected up. At this moment, dark gold ripples were released from the golden Xuanwu's body. A strong attractive force pulled at the huge sword that was flying away. Ji Juechen was being completely restricted right now. The blade of his sword suddenly turned black. The black light adopted a wavy structure and started to spread out. Against Shu Sanxia, Ji Juechen finally unleashed the full strength of his judgment sword. Suddenly, the water in the Xuanwu's domain seemed to have been corroded by the aura of darkness, and turned black at an alarming rate. Once this power of darkness was judged by the power of light later, the destructive power of Ji Juechen's attack was bound to be very great. However, Ji Juechen was quickly surprised. The suction force from the golden Xuanwu increased significantly. The aura of darkness released by his judgment sword was absorbed by it, and left none behind in the Xuanwu domain. Just like before, dark gold undercurrents continuously pestered the blade of Ji Juechen's sword. Because of this interference, his soul power was draining quickly. On the other side, the golden Xuanwu had turned completely black instantly, and released a very strong aura of darkness. Both sides seemed to be in a stalemate. Both Shusansha and Ji Juechen stopped taking the initiative to attack. The Judgment Sword was still releasing the power of darkness, while the Xuanwu's domain kept on weakening Ji Juechen. In such a situation, both of them were clearly aware that the next attack could decide victory for this fight. While they were fighting very intensely over there, Huo Yuhao was about to finish the preparations for his grilled fish and fish soup. Everyone turned their attention to watch this exciting fight. Who do you think will win? Tang Wutong asked Huo Yuhao. She wasn't familiar enough with Shusansha and Ji Juechen. She could only make a prediction based on what she was observing. Huo Yuhao smiled and said, "What do you think?" Tang Wutong rolled her eyes at him and said, "You're not gentlemanly at all. I was the one who asked first." Huo Yuhao laughed and said, "All right then. I think third senior will win." Tang Wutong snorted and replied, "Then I think Ji Juechen will win." Huo Yuhao was a little stunned as he inquired, "What's the reason?" "I'm the one asking first." Tang Wutong lifted her head and said, "Because you think that fellow will win. That's why I choose the other person." Huo Yuhao laughed and asked, "Do you want to make a bet?" "What bet?" Tang Wutong asked. Huo Yuhao thought for a moment before replying, "I haven't thought of one yet." "All right, let our stake be a favor. Whoever wins can ask the other party to do them a favor. However, this favor can't be too difficult. It can't flout moral and ethical codes, either. What do you think? For example, you can tell me to clean up your room, and I can make you massage my back." "Nonsense, you are obviously at an advantage here. Who's going to massage your back? We can't have body contact." Tang Wutong immediately retorted. Huo Yuhao laughed and said, "All right, we won't have any body contact. It's just for fun. Even if you lose, I won't ask anything from you. Even if I ask you for something, you can refuse to acknowledge it. It doesn't matter." Tang Wutong was furious. "Am I a sore loser to you? Let's bet." "I don't believe that the fellow who's not offensively adept will be able to win. The intersection of light and darkness is so powerful. He has absorbed too much of that power of darkness. Once he's struck, he'll definitely lose. He shouldn't be able to use the skill that he uses to switch positions anymore. There's too much darkness corroding his body. He'll definitely lose." Huo Yuhao chuckled slightly and said, "All right, we'll wait and see. Let's hook our pinkies." As he spoke, he reached out his right pinky in front of Tang Wutong. Tang Wutong was stunned. After this, she reached out her right pinky to hook with Huo Yuhao's right pinky. Tang Wutong's pinky was a little cold. It might be because she had cleaned herself in the river earlier. Her pinky was thin and delicate. On contact, it felt very cool and indescribably comfortable. Huo Yuhao was in a slight daze. Tang Wutong immediately pulled her hand back. "All right, let's do it this way. Whoever reneges on this bet is a dog." At this point, the fight on the other side had already experienced changes. Ji Juechen finally couldn't wait anymore. He had been accumulating his strength, but he was also being drained by the Xuanwu's domain at the same time. He needed to find a balance. This balance was almost achieved when he managed to summon the power of light, just as Shusansha absorbed the power of darkness. It was only at this point that his final attack was at its strongest. Bright golden light shot into the skies. The huge sword that was formed by Ji Juechen instantly turned golden. The intense aura of light was furiously unleashed. It was like a small golden sun had appeared above the ground. Even Yi Gai's holy soul power was being drawn in and unleashed as dim golden light, showing how strong the power of light carried by Ji Juechen's sword was. Once the Judgment Sword changed its state, it immediately freed itself from the restraint of the Xuanwu's domain. The Xuanwu's domain around him, that had restrained him earlier, was now slightly infected with the aura of darkness. At this moment, it became the target of his Judgment Sword. This video will end here.